Hello, my name is Xander. Welcome back to the Django ORM Mastery course, YouTube edition. In this tutorial, we focus in on extending or overriding the default behavior of the Django user model. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build a proxy model. That's going to provide model inheritance. So we can extend the default user model and then build additional behaviors so that potentially we could change, for example, the default behavior of certain aspects of interacting with the user model. Maybe we want to set a custom ordering. Maybe we want to create our own managers to change the behavior of the data that's returned, or potentially build our own methods. I will take you through this step by step. So I'll teach you how to create a new proxy class or proxy model. We'll then go ahead and create some managers, add some additional functionality, have a look at maybe, for example, the dunder string method, how we can override that, and then add a class method, and then just create a general method to add some additional functionality to our user model. Now remember, if you are thinking or if you are needing to add new fields to the user model, then this approach isn't the approach to take. We will look at that in the next tutorials. Of course, if you are looking to learn more about the Django ORM, don't forget to check out our course, Django for ORM Mastery. It is currently the highest rated course related to Django ORM. There is a link in the video description which will provide you the best price for this course. I will go through the whole setup. I do apologize. I like to do it because you may be completely new to Django, and I know that it's much easier for you to just fast forward a bit, move forward a bit in the timeline, rather than trying to work out how to create the new project if you want to follow along step by step. So first thing then, we'll create a new project here in Visual Studio Code. So I've created a new folder, opened up the new folder. So let's go ahead, and here I'm in the Mac OS. So it might be slightly different on Windows, but I'll let you know. So here we're going to type in and start a new virtual environment. And then that's going to be the same on Mac and Windows, and then slightly different on Mac here. I'm going to type in source VEMV to activate. If you're on Windows, you just need to type in VEMV /scripts/activate. That will activate the virtual environment. You can see that we have now the virtual environment activated. So let's pip install Django. And then we go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to clear this by pressing Command and K. Yours is going to be slightly different on Windows. So let's go ahead and start a new project. Django admin, start project, core with a dot here at the end, denoting the fact we want to create this project inside of this folder here. And now we can go ahead and create a new app. So let's do the Python 3 manage.py. And let's start a new app, and let's call this app user. So it may be that you create a separate app for users so you can manage everything within that single app. So that's the approach I'm taking here. Let's go ahead and just register this because we are going to potentially need to build a new model, proxy model. So we'll just go ahead and register this app. It's going to be user. And then we'll go back now into the user and start building our proxy model. So in object-oriented programming terms, we're just going to exercise the idea of model inheritance. We're going to take the existing class, our model, our user model, and then we're going to grab a copy of that, and then we're just going to extend, essentially. We're going to change the behaviors. So let's go ahead and access the user model. We learned how to do that in the previous tutorial. So that was from django.contrib.auth.admin. Let's import user so that we've grabbed the user table. So let's go ahead now and create a new table. So we call this class person, user, not user, don't use user, person. Yeah, let's go person. So we're going to inherit or use inheritance there. So bring in the user table, if you like. So we've got user, and now we can go ahead and make some changes. So first of all, we need to define the class meta So we need to set our model to proxy equals true. Okay, so we've just defined that this model here is a proxy model. Now this model isn't actually created. So if we were to now to migrate, this isn't actually going to be built, only the user model. So let's go ahead and now actually migrate. So Python 3 manage.py, let's go ahead and migrate. So we could run migrations. I'll just show you. You can see here that create proxy model person. Okay. And let's go ahead and migrate. Okay, so now we've migrated. I do have the SQLite extension installed. So I can go ahead and open this and have a look at it, hopefully. Okay, so you can see here that we don't have a person table. We've simply created a proxy model. Right, so how can we interact with this proxy model? We're going to need some data, right? So let's go ahead and create a new folder here. Let's make a fixtures folder. So we'll build some fixtures. So let's go ahead and I've already built the fixtures, by the way. So I'm just going to drop those in here. Now you can access this code. There's a link in the video description. You can access this. So I've created a new file here called db-admin fixtures. Inside of here, I'll show you this. I've created some fixtures so we have an admin user. So if you're not familiar here, password, this is encrypted. This is the encrypted password that we're going to store directly. We are using fixtures, so this data will just get dumped directly onto the table into new records or new rows. So that's encrypted. This password here is the word password, and you can see that's the same for each password. So this represents password. Right, so you can see that this is a super user, and then I've created a second user here, student 1. This is going to be a student first name. So I've added a first name to each of these other users, and these are all kind of student users. They don't have any special permissions. So there are 5 users. So if you haven't used fixtures before, go ahead and have a look at the format. This is a JSON file. You can see we've specified the model and then the primary key and then the fields and the data to insert that data. Now remember, in the user model by default, the first name is not required, nor is the email. These are optional fields, but I've just added them just for now. And you can see that each user here goes up I've done this in the wrong way around, so we can show you how to order them, C, B, and D. Okay, so that's the first name. So we're going to order by first name. So let's go into the models here then, and let's just change the ordering. So if you remember, or unless you've never done this before, then let's type in ordering equals, and then we can define the ordering. So let's order by first name, for example. Right, so that's that done. So let's have a look at now how to actually interact with this data once we've migrated it, of course. So first thing we need to do is type in Python 3 and then manage.py, load data, and then we just need to define this name here. So I'm just going to copy this name, and then I'm just going to load that data in, and you can see here it says ordering must be a tuple or list, because I need to go back into my models. I need to add a comma right here, and then I need to do that again. Okay, so I've just installed 5 objects. So I've just added 5 users to the database. So I'm now ready to interact with my new proxy model. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this because I'm going to need that. So let's go into the shell and interact with our data. Okay, and then I'm just going to paste that in so I can interact with my user model to begin with. So let's go ahead and say x equals user.objects.all. Let's give this a go. And you can see that I've got 5 users. And you can see by default, it just outputs the users. It looks like in the order, I'll start again. It looks like it outputs the users in order of ID or the key. Okay, so that's the default behavior. Now, at the moment, I'm not using my person proxy model here. So let's go ahead and start utilizing that and see how that we can extract the same information from the database. Remember, this is just a proxy model. So essentially, imagine the actual user model is right here. All that we've done is we've just added, all we've done here is that we've just inherited everything from it so that we can then make a few changes and then use it as per normal. So we're just kind of inheriting all that in here behind the scenes if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming principles. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that in. So that's the user model. So from user.models, let's go ahead and import person. And now let's do the same thing again. X equals person.objects, just the default manager at the moment, .all. And let's output that. And you can see here, we've now ordered this by first name because you can see the output's different. So the first time when we outputted from the user model, student 1, 2, 3, and 4. But now you can see we have person admin, person 1, student 3, 2, and 4. So if I go back into my fixtures here, that's the order based upon the first name. So the first name, the first student should be number 2, ID 2. So A, student 1. Okay, so we're ordering by first name. So that's the first one, student 1. And then B, so you can see that primary key 3, you can see here that student 2 is actually C. So you can see student 2 here is the third item because down here in primary key 4, username student 3, you can see the first name is B student. So in alphabetical order, this is the second item that should be returned. And you can see here student 3 is the second item that's returned. So this is just confirming the fact that this ordering is working and confirming the fact that our proxy model is working as intended. So you can see here, working with a proxy model, we're working with the user data as we were like when we were using the user model, but we're just adding this additional functionality, these different behaviors, so that we can change the behavior and interact with our user model in a slightly different way. So let's go ahead now and add some more information. So you may already be familiar with the dunder string method. So let's I use the word override that. Let's change that. I'll try and make it a little bit more friendly. So return self.firstName. So we're going to return the first name. So instead of here, for example, the default looks like the actual student username. That looks like the default dunder string return. The student username, student 1, so yes, 3, 2, and 4. If you remember from our fixes, that was the username. So let's go ahead and just close that and that and that. So let's return the first name. So we are going to need to probably exit here. And I'll bring this back up again. And I realize that you can't see that. 1 second. I do apologize if I've missed anything earlier. So I'll clear that. Right. So now we've added the first name. Let's go back into the shell. I'll press up. And then I can press up again and just bring in the person. And let's say, press up a few more times, grab that, output, and you can now see that we're returning the first name. So the dunder string here is returning the first name instead of the username, which was the default option. So if I were to now go to the let's import the user again. Let's just try that again. So x equals user.objects.all. Obviously, this is going to return the default username. So if I type in x, you can now see that this is returning the username and not what we've done here and extended through our proxy model and added now the new dunder string return, which is the first name. So it may be that you want to extend the user table and add your own managers because you want to work with the data in your application slightly differently, or you want to add a different behaviors, for example. So let's build a custom manager. So I'm going to call this person manager inactive. So this is just an example, of course. Models.manager. Okay, so we're going to create our own custom manager here. So we're going to say new function, get query set, and self. Okay, just need self, and then let's go for a return super So person manager inactive self dot get query set dot filter, and let's create a filter is active equals false. Okay, so all I've done here is that I've added some new functionality in the default setting, if you like, for when we grab data from the database. So when we use the person model, when we use the person proxy model now to access user data, what we've done here, if we use this manager within our proxy model, the data that returns from the database, we're going to filter it. And we're going to check to see if the user is false or not. So if the user is false, you can see we've created a theory. We've created a filter, that's going to return all the users that are set to false. So we're going to create that filter. So you can see here in my data, the last user here is set to default. What am I talking about? Is active is set to false. Apologies. So this is going to filter out whenever I run a query on the person proxy model. It's going to filter out all the users that are set to is active equals false. So that's what I'm doing there. So let's go ahead now and add my manager, object manager, to my proxy model. So let's call this, for example, this is going to be the name of the manager. So inactive equals, and then the manager, person manager inactive. Okay, so that's my new manager. So I can now utilize that to run queries and then to filter out the data that's returned. So let's give that a go. So I'll exit here. I go back in and then I bring in my models, person model, and then we go ahead and run. So we run our query. So x equals person. Now it's not going to be objects, that's the default manager, remember. So now we're going to use the inactive manager. Okay, .all. Okay, so function object has no attribute filter. Let's take a look. Get attribute filter. It looks okay to me. What am I doing wrong? Okay, so just looking at this, we're going to need the parentheses right there. So let's just exit again. We're going to need to run the shell again and bring this back in. So from user models import person, and then try this again. So this time it's worked. Press X, and you can see this time, although I've run the query to select all from the person or the user table, you can see that I've only returned one item because I've created a custom manager here, which is filtering out all of the items where is active equals false. So it's only returning those users, which is the D student, which is this student right here that's set to inactive equals false. So of course we can do the same thing again. Maybe we want to only run queries sometimes where the user equals true. So let's just set this to, for example, active. And then we can change this to true, and so that we can only this will allow us to return users, of course, that have been set to is active equals true. So let's go ahead and call this active. This manager, we call this person manager active. And then we go back, exit here, our terminal, and then we go ahead and go back into the shell, and then we do the same thing again, bring in person, run that, press X, and this time you can see that we've run the inactive. So let's run now the active. And you can see that we've got an error again. Object must be an instance of subtype or type. Okay. Okay, so you can see here that we've added this incorrectly. So we make that change. Do apologize. So change the name here. Let's go back in. So we need to come out again. Let's clear that. Let's go back into the shell. And then we'll bring in the person table. Let's go ahead and use the person.active.all. Okay, so here we're utilizing the active manager, which is connected to the person manager active manager that we've just set here, the custom manager. And then we'll go ahead and have a look, and you can now see I'm returning all of the users that are set to active. So let's move on to the final component, adding some methods here in our class. I'll quickly show you how to add them and how to use them. I haven't really covered that much on this channel so far, which after 2 years seems quite strange. So let's just add, first of all, a class method. So we use the class method declarator. The class method must have a reference to the class object as the first parameter. So let's say def, let's go for example, count_. So we make a method called count_. We're passing, which is, like I said here, the class method must have a reference to the class object as the first parameter. So CLS, and then let's go ahead and now create a return. So we're going to return, and we've made a reference to the class object. So we can say CLS as the reference to the class object, our objects, our manager, and then filter. So now we're going to say is active. Remember, we have a field called is active equals, and then we set that to true. And then we just go ahead and we count. So this is just going to return a number which represents all the users that are currently active in our person or the users model. So let's go ahead and utilize this. If I can open up if I can remember. Yep. Okay, so let's go in and we'll exit that. Let's go back into the shell and let's bring in the person. Okay, so let's go ahead and utilize it. So let's, for example, say person and then dot and then count. Oh, okay. So what that has returned looks like a list here of all the objects that are currently set to is active equals true. Now you did see that I've actually forgotten there to count them. So dot count. So I did want to count them. So if I do that again, you can see that isn't going to work. So I'll exit that. I have to go back into it again, bring it in, run it again, and this time you can see we're now returning 4. So a differentiation here. What's the difference between the manager and, for example, a method function that we define in the class? Well, one way to differentiate between them, the one way of thinking initially, is that the manager acts on the whole table, whereas the methods generally act on individual objects. So typically we might use a method to, for example, we're saving something, or if there's a particular record that we want to work with, typically we make a method based upon individual records or maybe a set of records. Whereas, like I said, the manager is working on the whole table. I think that's one good way to start thinking about the difference between how to use a manager or when to use a method. Right, so let's create a new method here. Let's call this check active, and I'll just highlight that point. So check active self. So this time it's not going to be a class method. So we're just going to return. Oh, so we're going to say an if statement, aren't we? So if, for example, self dot is active equals true. Let's just go ahead and return something simple. So you are active, and then we'll do an else. Return you are not active. Okay, so we'll utilize this, and I'll show you what I mean there by the fact that the manager we're referring to is like the whole model, whereas functions generally we're focusing on maybe individual sets of data. Right, so let's utilize this. So let's go and exit the shell. Let's go back into the shell and let's bring in person. Okay, so let's grab an item. So x equals person dot objects dot dot get id equals 1. So just grab the first item, return that, and now let's say x and then dot, and now let's use our function. We're going to check to see if the user is active. There we go, you're active. So this user is active. Let's, for example, grab I think ID 4, ID 5, they are not active. So let's give them a go. And then we say x.check active, you are not active. So if you haven't used functions, or if you haven't added your own functions inside of models, you're starting to see potentially the usage or the reasons to utilize that, or where you might potentially utilize or create a new function to add that type of functionality, as well as a new manager. Just before we finish, I wanted to introduce you to a different approach adding functions to the model. Now, this isn't necessarily recommended. I simply wanted to show you this simple approach to introduce you to the idea of the application module here, the application file here, which allows you to control aspects of your application. So just a light touch, an explanation then of that. So what we can do here in the apps.py file, this can actually be deleted, so your application will work absolutely fine. But here we're adding some different behaviors, we're defining some different behaviors for our application. So what we can do here, for example, is let's use the function ready, taken self. When applications are loaded, this is one of the last steps or final steps. Django will run the ready method of each application that we have set in our settings. So what we can do here is add some additional behaviors. So for example, let's go ahead and say user equals get user model, for example. So, from Django.contrib.auth, it's just a different way of adding in or importing in the user model. So get user model. I did mention earlier there was a few different ways of accessing the user model. So that will allow us to access the user model. Now, if we were to change the user model, then we won't need to go through our application and change this. This is going to find the default user model, and we can define that in the settings, and we'll look at that in later tutorials. So that makes it a little bit more flexible, utilizing this approach over than actually importing the user model. Right, so user equals get user model, and let's now say user dot say hi equals self.sayHi. So this is a function that we can add to the user model, and then we can access it through the user model. So let's give this a go. So let's go back in to the shell. Oh, okay. So 1 second, let's just double check this. User equals user.sayHi equals self. Yeah, looks okay. Looks like it's causing an error. So user config object has no attribute say hi. Oh, okay. So that's because, bear with me, because I've not created a function, have I? Say hi self, and then print. Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So we're back into the shell here. So let's go in and let's just try this on the person model to begin with, see if this works. So let's go for person dot say hi. There we go. So like I said, that isn't necessarily an approach that is recommended, but hopefully I've just kind of pushed you on a little bit. If you haven't utilized the apps.py before, maybe now you'll go into the Django documentation and read a little bit more about what this does, how this works, and how you could potentially utilize the apps.py file to add enhancements or change your application's behavior. So I do hope that's given you some insights into the Django user model. Don't forget to check out the course, the link in the video description, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.